Gaza City is surrounded as the IDF tightens its grip on the Hamas stronghold. Israeli leaders maintain there will be no ceasefire without the return of the hostages taken by the terrorists.
In response to rising anti-Semitism worldwide, Israel's government has issued a warning to its citizens. Avoid unnecessary travel and don't openly identify yourself as Jewish or Israeli. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell reports.
Israeli forces have surrounded Gaza City by attacking Hamas from the air, land, and sea. Meanwhile, as some international calls continue for a ceasefire, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told a group of pilots of Israel's intention.
I also want you to know that there is one thing we will not do. There will be no ceasefire without the return of the hostages. This should be completely removed from the lexicon. We say this to our friends and to our enemies. We will simply continue until we defeat them.
Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Michael Herzog told CBS Face the Nation on Sunday a potential humanitarian pause would only be considered with the release of hostages.
When people talk about a pause in the fighting, we are all for a pause that would allow for the release of hostages. Unfortunately, I'll explain the humanitarian issue, but unfortunately, it is not our impression that Hamas is serious about releasing them. They are playing for time. They're trying to stop our pressure and rearm and regroup themselves.
Sunday, the IDF chief spokesman provided further evidence Hamas uses hospitals as cover for their war machine. This video shows a tunnel entrance under the Sheikh Hamad or Qatari hospital.
Hamas is hiding behind hospitals. Hamas is sickly exploiting hospitals to disguise its war machine. Our war is with Hamas, not with the civilians of Gaza. We will not accept Hamas' cynical use of hospitals to hide their terror infrastructure.
Israel also showed its efforts attempting to warn civilians and get them out of harm's way. This phone call from last week urged Gazans near the Jabalia camp to go south, and more than 1 million pamphlets released warned Palestinians to flee to safety. The New York Times also reports evacuation efforts out of Gaza being hampered by Hamas, putting wounded fighters on departure lists among foreigners trying to cross into Egypt. In the meantime, pro-Hamas rallies continue in major cities worldwide, including Washington, D.C., with protesters at the entrance to the White House. Due to the alarming rise in anti-Semitic violence, Israel issued an unprecedented global warning.
The National Security Council is urging all Israelis to consider whether any foreign travel anywhere in the world is necessary at this dangerous moment. We are also asking citizens, and truly I cannot believe that we are doing this, we are asking all citizens to avoid displaying any outward signs of their Israeli or Jewish identity when traveling anywhere in the world.
Up north, the IDF and Hezbollah are engaged in the heaviest fighting since the 2006 Second Lebanon War. On Friday, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah neglected to enter the conflict in a major way, announcing instead that consistent attacks would continue along Israel's northern border.
The reality on the northern border of Israel today is an unbearable reality. It's a reality that Israel will not be able to accept for a long time. Israel will not be able to accept a situation that 60,000 people that were evacuated from their homes will not be able to go back.
Regional security analyst Sari Zahavi, founder of the Alma Educational Center, says Nasrallah is keeping options open.
I think that the bottom line is that once we are done with Gaza and once the campaign in the south will stabilize, I'm not even saying completely end, will stabilize, Israel will have to find a way to deal with Hezbollah, and Nasrallah knows that, and that's why he talked about the option of expansion of the war as very realistic.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, Yonah Bob is the senior military correspondent for the Jerusalem Post. He joins us now from our bureau in Jerusalem. So what's your analysis of the strategy of the IDF and how much has been accomplished so far?
So a lot has been accomplished, all right? Most of northern Gaza, we have a certain amount of control of. The IDF has extensive control of the Jabalia neighborhood, the Beit Hanun neighborhood, a couple of others. They've also been in Shijaya. These names may not mean a lot, but to Israelis, this is deep parts of Hamas's control. In 2014, Israel never got this deep before. So Israel is now flushing out ambushes that are coming out of tunnels, that are coming from hospitals and all kinds of other locations, and it's moving its forces in a very smart, tactical way, not letting them stay too long to be ambushed, but long enough to flush people out. And we're using air power, artillery, and tanks anytime Hamas is coming out. They're getting nailed down. I also got a special briefing. The artificial intelligence unit of IDF intelligence is systematically finding people the second they come out, and sometimes being able to target them within 6 minutes with all of the IDF's power. So in the north, we're making tremendous progress. The key word that people are talking about now is breaking Hamas's will to fight. That's going to take some time. It's going to take at least some weeks. It could take some months, but the IDF is on the way.
Has the IDF already started engaging Hamas in the tunnels?
Absolutely. They're even on the first day of the ground invasion about a week and a half ago, they hit 150 targets related to the tunnels, all in that first day. They're continuously fighting in the tunnels. They're using sometimes technological means. We know in the past they've used robots. We know in the past they've used concrete. We know in the past they've used water. They can use bombs. They can send troops in. There are a variety of ways. Israel's been fighting the tunnels very hard since 2014. 2014 was the Gaza War that woke us up about the tunnel threat. Israel spent billions of dollars for fighting the tunnels. So Israel was already ready to fight the tunnels in this war. Obviously, again, it's going to take time, and Hamas is not fighting on any one defense line. They're almost already sort of fighting as if in a guerrilla war style, but Israel is flushing them out neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block, and eventually Hamas is losing so many commanders that their effectiveness, even in trying to do the ambushes, is already starting to go down.
Do you have a prediction on the timeline here? I know it's tough to make, but how long are we looking at? Prime Minister Netanyahu predicted a very long time. Do you share that view, or is it moving more rapidly than anyone thought?
It depends what we're talking about. If you're talking about, let's call it the main war, where Hamas is still trying to fight as a collective military unit, I think you're looking at it. Originally, they said a month to 2 months. It might take a little bit longer than that, because what I was describing to you so far has all been in northern Gaza. There's a smaller amount of invasion going on in southern Gaza. That hasn't gotten very large yet, and that's going to take time. They're going to have to increase that at some point. They're going to have to deal with sensitive points like the Shifa hospital, where a lot of Hamas's commanders are underground. Some of that will take long. There's not going to be a ceasefire now, but there could be pauses. So all of that could drag it out. But we're talking the main thing, let's say a couple of months. But then there's another stage. There's going to be an insurgency like the United States saw in Iraq, in Syria and Afghanistan. And that could take a lot longer time. People have talked about that in terms of at least several months. But at least at that point, we will know that Hamas, as a collective military force that can control Gaza, will already be defeated. At that point, it will be more about making it easier for somebody else to take over Gaza, whether Israel hands it over to the United Nations or the Palestinian Authority or some group of Arab states, the United States, some hybrid of all of that. Nobody knows exactly what the answer to that is, but that's where things would go. And so fighting the insurgency will make that part easier.
Are the rocket attacks still happening, or have they stopped?
The rocket attacks have not slowed down, let alone stopped. Look, what you have to understand about the rocket attacks is this Israeli military strategy right now is sort of guerrilla warfare to guerrilla warfare. They're not leaving troops to stand in a spot for 24 hours to make sure that nobody shoots rockets from there. They're moving around from place to place to flush out Hamas forces, flush out the ambushes. So that means that anytime the Israeli forces are in an area, there's not going to be rocket attacks, and it's harder to ambush those Israeli forces because they're continually moving, but it does mean that it's going to be harder to stop the rocket attacks. Obviously, at some point in the coming weeks, or I'd say at the outside time frame, maybe 2 months, Israel's going to start stationing forces in a larger way, in a more stationary way, to stop the rocket attacks. But unfortunately, that could still take time.
Do you anticipate there will be a lot of world pressure right now, particularly concerning the refugee camp, the hospitals, the mosques, the churches, the places where Hamas seems to concentrate its command and control. Are you seeing that there's any effective thing that Israel can do? The UN is already talking about war crimes. The International Court of Justice is already talking about it. Their prosecutor is on the border right now. What is the long term on what I'll call the public relations war?
Right, that is a great question. And like you said, there already is tremendous pressure on Israel, all right? There's countries that are already pushing at the UN for a ceasefire. And what is keeping, I'm going to talk about sort of the Israeli side and then beyond the Israeli side, within Israel, what is keeping us going is people, everybody knows somebody, basically, who was killed, if not multiple people, who were killed and kidnapped on October 7th. I was in Be'eri, one of the worst slaughters. I saw, the fresh blood. I saw the blown up, not partially destroyed, blown up houses, torched cars, chaos. I would call it basically hell on earth. The only thing it reminded me of that I could come up with was the Auschwitz death camps that I had visited about 30 years earlier. And so Israelis are not going to give in to that pressure because they know we gave Hamas 15 years of chances. Hamas cannot be allowed to continue to rule Gaza. Now, what do we do in terms of that international pressure? The truth is, your viewers can be a big help on that. As long as the United States is standing by Israel, vetoing or preventing resolutions at the UN to go to a ceasefire, if they're only calling for temporary pauses, as long as that's happening, and to the extent that you can help in the United States to keep that going, Israel will be able to keep going. Once the pressure from the United States gets larger, once the United States starts saying, if you don't end soon, that could impact how much we resupply you militarily, then Israel will have to really start looking at the clock. The hope is that the United States also understands. They saw Hamas was like ISIS on October 7th, the butchery, dismembering bodies, evil in its worst kind. So that is keeping, hopefully, the United States to allow Israel to continue for as long as it needs to not only send a message to Hamas, but to actually defeat it.
Well, we stand with Israel, and we view any pause as just being an opportunity for Hamas to reload. Now's the time to eliminate them, and we stand with you and will continue to stand with you. Longer term, though, and I think this has sort of been a trend now for 75 years, Israel can win the battle, but lose the war and the ideological war. The Queen of Jordan just this past weekend came out and said, Hamas can be eliminated, but you haven't stopped the problem. There seems to be a continual call within the Palestinian community from the river to the sea, and I'm seeing that slogan again and again and again recently, and it just chills me to the bone because I know what that means. It means an absolute slaughter of every Israeli and the elimination of the Israeli state. Longer term, and let's talk in terms of the next couple of decades, do you see a hope for a lasting peace?
So in the very, very long term, I'm not talking, a year or 3 years from now, because a year or 3 years from now is like restructuring Gaza, getting, again, some of the international parties that I talked about to take it over, maybe to eventually be able to hand it back to the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank. But in the longer term, I do see hope. Why? Because the Abraham Accords. All right, the Abraham Accords in 2020, we saw United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, all within 4 months normalized with Israel. We know, and it's talked about in my book, Target Tehran, that Israel and the Mossad have had all kinds of movement with the Saudis, and so that might be delayed. The Saudi normalization might be delayed, but MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, still wants it, and he calls the shots. So I still believe that can happen. We still have peace with Egypt for over 40 years. We still have peace with Jordan for over 25 years. So someday, the more that other Arab countries join the Abraham Accords and put greater pressure on the Palestinians for them to realize, hey, time is not on our side. The longer we wait, the less we're going to get in any kind of diplomatic deal. And hopefully, again, defeating Hamas will take the most extreme element out of the game, So yes, in the very long term, I don't want to put a timeline on it. In the very long term, I'm optimistic, and also I'm a God-fearing person. I believe we came back to Israel after the Holocaust was not an accident. I think it was miraculous, and so I do think at some point we will get to a peace in the Promised Land, not just being in the Promised Land.
Well, Yonah Bob, thanks for the analysis and thanks for joining us. And we join with you in praying Psalm 122. May there be peace in Jerusalem. Well, on Israel's northern border, residents face constant threats from Hezbollah rockets. Chuck Holton shows us what life is like for a community in the shadow of conflict.
Early morning, and I'm driving along Israel's northern border. On the other side of that fence is Lebanon. I'm the only one out here for a reason. Hezbollah has been shooting at anything they see on the Israeli side. And while I can't show them, IDF fighting positions are spread all along the route. Overhead, an observation balloon guards the skies. My path leads to the village of Matsuva, a mere breath from the volatile border. This kibbutz sits only a couple kilometers from the Mediterranean Sea back there, and only about 2 kilometers from the Lebanese border. And so while it normally has 1,400 people living here, now they're down to just 100 essential personnel that are here to keep the farm running and take care of external security. The real question is, what is the new normal going to look like? Because many of the people who live here are saying they're tired of living under the threat from Hezbollah, which can launch rockets over here in a matter of seconds at any time. And it hasn't been just for the last 3 weeks. This has been going on for years.
Nothing will ever be the same again, more so in the south.
The once bustling village is now a quiet reflection of the turmoil.
They need to go hard and completely fix this problem. We've given in so many times. Every operation we start, and then we're requested ceasefire, and then there's a lot of things to consider with that, world opinion, citizens, and then it stops, and then within very little time, it starts up again. But this time, with all those atrocities, and they have to finish up. And they said it's going to take a while, and I'm sure it will. And we just have to be patient. But you can't live in a country where there's always a threat. Well, it doesn't matter where you live.
From northern Israel, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Well, we want you to know the facts about the Jewish homeland, the state of Israel. You can own a DVD copy and receive instant streaming access to CBN's documentary, The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel. This film will take you on a journey through the 50 years that preceded the founding of the modern state of Israel, and you can see history unfold through the eyes of some of Israel's greatest visionaries and founders, including David Ben-Gurion and Golda Meir. All you have to do to get your copy, call us, 1-800-700-7000, and it's for a gift of any dollar amount. You can also visit cbn.com/thehope.